When I was younger, I had a Rebbe who would tell us the story about the Rugged Shavar Gaon. The Rugged Shavar Gaon loved to learn so much that he would never want to even take a haircut because he might miss a few minutes of learning. And in order to make sure that he wouldn't fall asleep, when he would learn at night, he would set his chair next to a wall, and he had a nail banged into the wall, and he would tie his hair, which was very long because he didn't take that many haircuts, and he would tie it to the nail behind his chair. And this way, if in the middle of the night he would doze off, his head would lower, and the nail that was holding his hair would yank him awake, and he would continue learning. So this Rebbe would say, what can I do? I love to sleep. And I have a long beard. This Rebbe had a very long beard. And when I learn, I bang a nail in the floor. And I tie my beard to the nail in the floor. So this way, when I pick up my head to learn, my beard yanks me back to go back to sleep. In this week's Parshas Noach, the Torah starts off by saying, Noach ish tzadik, tamim haya b'dayraisav. That Noach was a tzaddik, he was a righteous person, and he was complete b'dayraisav in his generation. And the Gemara focuses on this word b'dayraisav. Why does the Torah have to reference and say that he was a tzaddik in his generation? So there's a machlokes between Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. Reish Lakish says that if Noach was a tzaddik in his generation, which was so full of evil and was so corrupt, Kolshkin, surely if he would be in a different dar that would have many tzaddikim around him, surely he would be even greater. Rabbi Yochanan says the exact opposite. When the Torah says that he was a tzaddik tamim haya b'dayraisav, it was only in comparison to his surroundings, to his generation, was Noach considered righteous. But had he been in the generation of Avram Avinu, Noach would not have been anything significant. He wouldn't have been anything special. And Rashi over here brings down these two ways of learning b'dayraisav. So the first question that arises is, we could understand Reish Lakish's approach, that when the Torah says Tam haya b'dayraisav, that was a shvach, it was a compliment, an underlying Noach's greatness. But how do we understand Rabbi Yochanan? According to Rabbi Yochanan, it would seem that when the Torah is saying b'dayraisav, it's actually lignai, it's something negative. We're like cutting down Noach. Additionally, when we go through this parsha, we kind of get a mixed view of who Noach was. On the one hand, at the end of Bereshis, last week's parsha, the last pasuk says, "V'Noach matza chen be'enei Hashem." Noach found favor in the eyes of Hashem. In addition, the first pasuk of this week's parsha, it says, Noach ish tzaddik. He was righteous. He was a tzaddik. Tamim haya. He was complete. Es holekim es halech Noach. Noach walked with Hashem. So all of this would lend itself to paint a picture of righteousness, of greatness, of godless, of Noach. Yet, we also find certain attributes of Noach that perhaps weren't so great. We have the Pshat of Rabbi Yochanan that we just mentioned. B'dayraisav, he was considered something unique and special and a tzaddik. But if he would have been in the generation of Avram Avinu, he would not have amounted or been anything special or unique. Additionally, if you look at this week's parsha later on, Rashi says in Perek Zayin Pasuk Zayin, Rashi says that Noach was mikatne emuna. He had minimal trust and faith in Hashem. And Rashi explains over there that he was kind of on the fence. He did believe and he didn't believe. He wasn't 100% certain that even though Hashem told him that the Mabul is going to come, that the Mabul indeed will transpire. In fact, he was outside the Teva, and he did not go inside the Teva until the water had risen to the degree and to the level that it forced him to go inside. And he had no choice but to go inside because he was still kind of on the fence. And Rashi says he was mekatne emuna. And finally, toward the end of this week's parsha, Perek Tes, Pasuk Chaf, the pasuk over there says, "Vayochel Noach ish ha'adama." After Noach left the Teva, Vayochel Noach debased himself. Ish ha'adama, the man of the earth. He was like a man of the earth, like a peasant, like a farmer. Vayita kerem, and he planted a vineyard, which was not a complimentary. So who is Noach? How do we understand? How do we approach him? Was he a tzaddik? Or was he a flawed person? Now, this last question comes from a very black and white mindset. Most of us have a mindset of either a person's a tzaddik, a person is righteous, or he's severely lacking. It's either or. And when we call someone a tzaddik, someone like a gadol, in our mind, it conjures up a perfect picture, kind of a image that this person is like a malach Elokim. He is a heavenly angel. He's above reproach. He's above mistake. And we live in this attitude that it's either or. And the Torah is telling us something phenomenal. Noach was a flawed human being. He was far from perfect. He was an Ish Adama. He was Mekatne Emuna. And perhaps even if he would have been in a different generation, he would be considered ordinary. He would not be anyone special, anyone unique. But nevertheless, because he walked with Hashem, his halech, his halech Noach, because he did not go with the corruptness, he did not go with the negativity, he did not go with the wickedness of his generation, and he did his absolute best. Even though he was a flawed person, Hashem still calls him a tzaddik. Hashem still says, Motza chen be'enei Hashem. In fact, this quote-unquote ordinary person, this flawed person, who is a mixed bag, has a tremendous amount of godless and goodness, but is also very human and is very flawed. In fact, Noach lived almost 1,000 years. I believe it was 950 years that Noach was alive. Besides for the story of the Mabul, the Torah tells us very little about Noach's life. The only other story the Torah tells us about Noach was after the Mabul, where he got drunk and he was exposed and he fell asleep in his tent. Hardly complimentary, hardly a good ending to a story. Imagine if you go into your local Sfarim store to buy the latest Gadol book of a Rebbe, of a Yeshiva, of somebody who just passed on. Imagine the last final chapter of this Gadol is a story about how he went out into the world, he got drunk, and he fell asleep exposed. And his children found him lying naked in his tent. It would be there would be a tumult. It would be it would be banned, such a book. Yet that's what the Torah ends the story of Noach. Noach, who Hashem chose to save mankind, to perpetuate animal kind and humanity. Noach is the only one who has a whole parsha, the Torah, named after him. Noach, who Hashem calls a tzaddik, who Hashem calls a tamim, who Hashem says motza chen be'enei Hashem. He was not a perfect human being. And that's on purpose. Because the Torah in this week's Parsha wants to tell us a foundational, vital message. The Kotzker Rebbe used to famously say, Hashem doesn't want perfection. Hashem has enough malachim for that. What Hashem wants are imperfect human beings. To be human means to be imperfect. It means to be flawed. It means to have shortcomings. And nevertheless, you could still be a tzaddik. Tzaddik doesn't mean that you're perfect. Tzaddik doesn't mean that you're not flawed, that you don't fail. Tzaddik means that despite all of that, you still strive to do your best, and you still follow Hashem, and you don't follow the ways of everybody around you. But that's confusing, because we think that we have to always be perfect. We think that if we are not absolutely perfect at all the time, then there's something wrong with us. There's something wrong with being human. But that's what Hashem wants. Hashem wants us to be flawed human beings, striving for perfection, even if we never actually attain perfection. Our GPS is focused toward growth, toward getting closer to Hashem. But here's the secret. We are ordinary. There's nothing wrong with being ordinary. That's what Hashem wants us to be, ordinary human beings. Because ordinary human beings can be tzaddikim, can save the world, can have a whole parsha named after us. And sometimes when we hear stories of tzaddikim and stories of gedolim, they're usually meant to inspire and to motivate. But many times they actually have the opposite effect, because all we do is we glorify and we hyper-focus just on their accomplishments and on their greatness. And we completely hide and make believe that they had no flaws, they had no struggles, they had no weaknesses, that they never had a bad day, that they never got angry, that they never struggled with anything. And what that does is it gives us, the layman, the regular, ordinary person on the street, a skewed, dishonest perspective of what it means to be a growing person, what it really means to be a tzaddik. To be a tzaddik means that despite my struggles, despite failing, I still try. And of course, gedolim also struggled in whatever they did. And it's a disservice to make believe like they didn't. Because we're showing a dishonest and unhuman picture of who they are. And that's the message of Noach. All of us struggle. Some of us struggle financially. Some of us struggle with consistency. Consistency, always coming on time, whether it's to learn, whether it's to daven. Some of us struggle with our children, to be present, to be kind, to be gentle. Some of us struggle with anger, not showing anger at home, not losing it. Some of us struggle with trusting Hashem and trying to control too much, whether it's finances, whether it's relationships. Some of us struggle with judging other people, with feeling superior than other people. Some of us struggle with unresolved traumas that hold us back. Some of us struggle with impure thoughts, with seeing things we shouldn't be seeing, with doing things perhaps we shouldn't be doing. Some of us struggle with shame. There's a lot of things that we struggle with, but we live in a world where we're afraid to show that we're human. We have to walk around with a game face as if I'm perfect, as if I have all the money I need, as if I always have a good day, every day's amazing, and I cannot show you my weakness. Because some reason, if I show you my weakness, there's something wrong with me. Says Parshas Noach, there's nothing wrong with me if I struggle. There's nothing wrong with me if I fail. You know what that means? It means I'm a human being. That's what it means to be, there's nothing wrong with being ordinary. There's nothing wrong, because nevertheless I could still be a tzaddik. I could still save mankind. I could still be considered tamim. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, there's a tremendous lesson. B'day Raisab, because in his generation he was special, but in a different generation he wouldn't have been special. And that's okay, because tzaddikim are ordinary people. We may not have long beards, and we may not own yeshivas, and we may not have many chassidim. But when we're hishalech, esalekim hisalech noach, when we go day in, day out, and we do the best we can, try to earn an honest living, try to grow, try to become better people, better husbands, better fathers, better members of our community, become more present, have more gratitude, and thank Hashem for our gifts, and focus on the positivity as opposed to the negativity. Doing more chesed, spreading light, spreading love, spreading encouragement, every little bit. That's a tzaddik. And this is not just in how I judge myself. This is also in my day. We all think we need to have an amazing day. Every day has to be an amazing day. Well, guess what? Most days, or many days, are not amazing. It's like the weather. Some days the sun is brightly shining and it's 74 degrees with a gentle breeze. But there are many days where it's 48 degrees, cloudy, misty, windy. It's not cold, it's not hot. And those days I just want to go and cover your head with a pillow and blanket and not wake up. It's okay to have an ordinary day. It's okay not to feel amazing. That's what greatness is made out of. It's made out of the ordinary. I know someone special on his voice message. He says, thank you for calling. Please leave a message, and may you have an ordinary day. So who was Noach? He was Mr. Ordinary.